Hey everybody, it's Chris from Cali Raised LED, and today we're going to install our beautiful 4Runner roof rack. What you see here today is our premium 360 lighting option with both a dual row light bar in the front and pods on both the passenger and driver side. This video is going to cover both the premium and the economy roof rack installations. Thank you for joining us, and let's get started. We're now going to begin the installation of our front valance. This will work for both premium and economy racks. For our economy rack, you're going to need your 2 front mounting brackets, your front valance support, and your front valance. This is for the premium. Your economy one will look a little different for either your LED cutout or your no LED cutout. You will also need your front valance hardware kit. To begin, we're going to start with the premium, and I will give you notes for the economy as we go. To begin our installation, we need to get our 2 front mounting brackets. To put them correctly, the tabs on the larger side are going to be pointing in towards each other. We're going to go ahead and set them wide apart. We're now going to take our adjustable light cover and we're going to install our short aluminum spacers onto the studs. With those installed, we are going to put our stud through the slotted hole on the mount and set it on our workbench. We're going to do the same for the other side. With these lined up, we can now put our 3/8 bolts in. You're going to take your 3/8 bolt and you're going to grab one of your silver 3/8 washers and put it on the bolt. Taking this, we're going to put it through our mount, install our bronze bushing, go through our light cover, install our second bronze bushing and our lock nut. Again, very important, we're going to leave these hand tight until the very end. Now we can start to put our valance support together. We are now going to install our valance support. This bracket goes with these fingers pointing down and this lip pointing down towards the floor. You're going to simply set it in place on top of your mounts loosely. It's okay if it falls down, it's all going to come together. We're now going to take our front valance and do the same thing. With our parts sitting in position, we're now going to install a couple bolts to hold it together. With everything laying in place, we're going to get one of our 1/4 inch bolts that is 5/8 inch long and one of our black washers and put it on. From here, you're going to put your bolt through your valance, through your support, and into your mount. A little trick that makes it easy to thread these in sometimes is to go ahead and grab your Hw4 Allen wrench or socket and use it to help get your bolt started. Just as we do with every step, we're going to go ahead and put these in hand tight to begin with. Grabbing another 5/8 long 1/4 inch bolt and washer, we're going to repeat the step a second time. With one side in place, we're going to skip the middle bolts for now and move on to the other side. With these all hand tight, We can now do our 4 bolts across the front. Again, we are using the 5/8 long bolt, washer, put it through, thread it in. Now that we have our 8 bolts in the front, we're going to do our 2 top bolts. These top bolts, we'll be using our longer 1/4 inch by 3/4 inch long bolt. We're going to go ahead and put a nut on there. You're going to thread it through the valence and mount. You are then going to grab another washer and a 1/4 inch lock nut. Install those on the back side. Again, leaving everything hand tight. I'm now going to take my Hw4 Allen. You can use a socket or a traditional L wrench. And we're going to start by tightening all these bolts down here on the bottom, and then we're going to finish with our 2 on top. With all these bolts tight, we are now going to tighten the bolts for our light cover. We're going to take our entire assembly and we're going to flip it over and set it down. We are now going to tighten our 3/8 bolt and nut with a 9/16 wrench. You're actually going to need 2 of them. When we tighten these down, we are trying to get them snug. Not tight, not torqued, not over the top, just snug. If you over tighten these, your light cover will not move. With our bolts tight, we can now check the movement of our light cover. It should move freely, but it shouldn't flop or fall down if we let it go. It should have a little bit of resistance to help keep it in place while we're moving it around. This one feels really good. We're going to move on to the next step. Included in your hardware kit are these rubber bumpers with the stud sticking out. On your mounts, you'll notice there are 2 1/4 inch holes. We are going to grab our bumper. We're going to put it through the hole. We're going to put a 1/4 inch washer on, and then a 1/4 inch lock nut. There are 4 positions. We're going to repeat this step 4 times. We will now grab our 7/16 wrench and tighten these down. You will have to hold this piece of rubber as there's not another nut for you to hold with a wrench. The last and final step is to install our trim piece. If you notice, there is a top flat piece and a bottom rubber piece. The bubble or rubber piece, we want to face down so it touches your vehicle. We send these to you a little bit long so that you can trim them. Go ahead and line it up on one end, measure it out, trim the other side. For me, I use a simple set of sharp wire cutters, cuts right through this very easily. Once it's trimmed to length, you're going to go ahead and set it on, and you're going to take this groove and you're going to push your valance into this groove. Slowly work your trim piece over your valance, making sure that it gets pushed completely into position. I find it helps to go ahead and push with even pressure on your thumb and kind of wiggle up and down to help it slide over the aluminum valence. It can be a tedious process. Feel free to take breaks, give your thumb a break. But we want to make sure we get this thing installed all the way on and all the way across. Sometimes these trim pieces can stretch a little bit as we pull them along here. If you get down to the end and realize you need to trim a little bit off, not a problem. Go ahead and grab your snips. Give it another trim. Front valence is now complete. If we flip it over, you'll see your complete assembly. Everything fitting very nicely. Our light cover moving very freely, but firm. Notice it's not falling down, but I'm also not putting a ton of pressure on it. This is perfect. We're now going to move on to our rear valence. The rear valence is a premium rack only feature. We are now going to begin the assembly of our rear valence and rear mounts. If you have a premium rack, you're going to be installing the rear valence. If you have an economy rack, you're going to be installing the rear mounts only.
First, you're going to get one extrusion, your rear valence, your rear mounts, your L brackets, and you're going to need hardware from both your mounting hardware kit and your miscellaneous hardware kit if you have a premium. First, we're going to put our T-nuts into our extrusions. Looking at the edge profile of your extrusion, notice that your T-nut has a similar shape to it. It is not just a rectangle. Make sure you're putting the tapered sides in that match the profile of the extrusion. It should slide in effortlessly. You're going to put 4 on the back side if you have a premium and 2 on the front side if it's just an economy. Again, we're going to put 4 on the back side if you have a premium rack and 2 on the front side if you only have an economy. The premium rack will get all 6 T-nuts. Double checking, we have 2 in the front, 4 in the back. The next thing we're going to do is put on our rear valence. Using an Allen wrench or a screwdriver, roughly move your T-nuts into their locations. We're going to locate them properly in just a second. We are going to take our valence and we're going to set it on top of our extrusion so we can see where the holes go. Using your tool, you're going to move the T-nuts into position to line up with the holes on the valence. With everything lined up, you're going to grab a 1/4 inch by 1/2 inch long bolt and a washer. You're going to put the washer onto the bolt. Then you're going to thread the bolt through the valence and into the T-nut. For the valence, make sure that it is bent upward, not downward. Line up your holes on your valence over your T-nuts and loosely put the bolts in. Again, grabbing your bolt, installing your washer, putting it in place. With all 4 in, we're going to use our fingers and make these hand tight. Next, we're going to install our L brackets to our valence. Grabbing a 1/4 inch by 5/8 long bolt, install a washer. The bolt is going to go into the threaded insert on the L bracket. Place the L bracket in place and tighten the bolt into the bracket, leaving it snug and hand tight. Do this on both sides. Spinning your valence around so you can get a better view, we are now going to put on our rear mounts. It is very important that when you look at these mounts from the front, that the C shape is facing the outside of the vehicle. Your roof is not flat, it's actually tapered, so it's really important that these brackets are put in the correct location. Grabbing a 1/4 inch by 1/2 inch long bolt, put on a washer, position your T-nuts to the right and left of the extrusion, setting your mount in place, put the bolt through the mount and into the T-nut. As we always do, put these in hand tight. Again, double checking that our C shape is facing the outside of the vehicle.
Now going to begin the fun part, putting our rack together. You're going to need to start with your 2 roof rack side panels and 1 extrusion bar. You're also going to want to go ahead and open up your side panel hardware kit, which is comprised of 1/4 inch by 5/8 long bolts and 1/4 inch washers. To ensure we've got everything laid out properly, I want you guys to notice something very important. See these silver threaded inserts? These go on the inside of your rack. When we lay these out, we need to make sure that when our rack is together, they are pointing towards the inside. With our extrusion bar, we're going to start by installing it in our 5th extrusion position. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Taking our bolt with a washer, we're going to put it through our side panel and we are going to thread it into our extrusion bar. Now grabbing another one and repeating the step. Notice that I've only put these in very loose. We're not trying to assemble anything right now. We're just trying to get it together. We're going to go ahead and step over to the other side and repeat the process. Please remember that these are aluminum extrusions, meaning that you can mess these threads up if you force it. Don't force any bolts in. If you have a problem with the thread, take your bolt out. Don't force anything in there because once you put it in, it's probably not coming out. With these 3 installed, we're now going to put in our rear extrusion and mounts and our valence if you have the premium rack. With our rear valence in hand, we're going to go ahead and rotate it into position and install it on our rack. Again, we are using our 1/4 inch by 5/8 long bolt with a 1/4 inch washer. Put your washer on your bolt, thread it into your extrusion. Next, we're going to go ahead and tighten this rear extrusion into position. Now we're going to go ahead and tighten our 4 top bolts that hold our rear valence to the extrusion. We're going to go ahead and put our bolts in for our L clamps. Taking one of our 1/4 inch by 3/4 inch bolts, we're going to go ahead and put on a 1/4 inch washer. We're going to put our bolt through our side panel and through our L bracket. On the back side, we're going to install our 1/4 inch washer, then 1/4 inch lock nut. Now that those are hand tight, I'm going to go ahead and tighten this down. Taking our 1/4 inch by 3/4 inch long bolt, putting on our washer, pushing it through our side panel and our L bracket, putting our washer on, and lastly our 1/4 inch lock nut. We are now going to go ahead and prepare to put on our middle mounting feet, and if you have the 360 lighting package, we're also going to do a couple items to get those in place as well. The mounting feet is for both premium and economy racks. Our extrusion in our number 4 position, we need to go ahead and take out 2 bolts on one side that we left hand tight. With these 2 bolts out, we're going to go ahead and slide some T-slots into this bottom front channel. When I say front, I mean front of the rack and bottom as in underneath. We're going to grab our T-slot and simply slide it in. We're going to be putting 2 of them in the front channel. With those 2 in, we can now put our extrusion back down and put in our bolts. Now we need to prepare our extrusion for position number 3. If you only have the economy or standard side rack, you can go ahead and skip any of the details about the pod brackets. For the mounting feet, we're going to do the exact same thing, but instead of the front position, we're going to put 2 T-nuts in the rear position. Those are the T-nuts for our mount. If you have the 360-degree lighting package, you also were given one of these brackets. This bracket is going to go in this position to hold your pod right where it needs to be. Before we put this extrusion in, we need to make sure we install our T-nuts for this bracket. We're going to need to put 2 in the very front, and 2 in our bottom front position. With all of our T-nuts installed, we can now go ahead and put our extrusion into the rack. Keeping our extrusion oriented correctly, we're going to put it in place and install one of our 1/4 inch by 5/8 bolts with a 1/4 inch washer, just like we've done in all the other positions. We are now going to work through our last 2 extrusions on the back of the rack. If you do not have the 360-degree lighting position, simply put your 2 extrusions in. Again, you're using your 1/4 inch by 5/8 long bolts and 1/4 inch washers. If you do have the pod mounts, you have to put some T-nuts in before you install your bar. Just like our other one, we need to put our mounts in the back facing this and on the bottom rear slot. We're going to put 2 in the side and 2 in the bottom. Ensuring these 2 positions where my fingers are closest to the cutout for the pod. My T-nuts are in these 2 slots, and they go closest to the cutout for the pod. With our last extrusion, we're going to go ahead and put this into the 8th position. Again, same bolts, same washers. Now that we have all these extrusions in place, we can go ahead and grab our Allen wrench and tighten down all the existing extrusions into place. We still have to put the front items in, but we're going to go ahead and lock in the back of this rack. Now we're going to go ahead and put in our last 2 extrusions in positions 1 and 2. We're going to start with number 2. This is a plain and simple extrusion. 2 bolts on one side, 2 bolts on the other. A little trick if you're by yourself, put the bolt in 2 turns, pull it towards the other side so it can set down. For extrusion number 1, if you have the premium or economy with the light bar and you purchased our mounts, we're going to go ahead and put our T-slots into our extrusion for our mounts. This is a mount for our 42-inch dual row LED. We also have a mount for our dual function LED. If you line this mount up to our extrusion, you'll see where the T-slots need to go. You are going to have 2 brackets, so put 2 in one position and put 2 in the other. With our T-nuts in, we can now put our last extrusion into position. You want to ensure that your T-slots line up so that your mount is pointing the correct direction. Putting our washer on our bolt, and hold our extrusion in place, and put in our bolts. With our last two extrusions in place, we can now install our front valence assembly. This is going to be the same process for premium or economy racks. With our assembly in hand, we're now going to put it into position. These use the same 1/4 inch by 5/8 long bolt with a 1/4 inch washer. For those with the premium racks, our stud that sticks out here on the end is going to go into our cutout on the side. If you have an economy rack, don't worry about it. Get it into position and put in your bolts. Getting my assembly into position, I am now going to install my bolts through the side panel and into our front mount. With all of our bolts in, we can now go ahead and tighten our two front extrusions and our front mount. This does have a little bit of wiggle room to it. Go ahead and get it lined up where it needs to go and tighten down your bolts. With everything locked in, we are now going to install our knobs. If you have the premium rack, you're going to go ahead and screw this onto the stud of your light cover. This is what locks our light cover into position. To adjust your light cover, loosen your knob, flip it down, tighten it up. Ready to get it back on the road, loosen it up, move it up, tighten your knob. Now that we've got everything locked in place, we're going to flip our rack over and we're going to install all those mounting brackets that we put all of our T-nuts in position for. So my assistant Susie is going to come over here and we're going to give it a flip. Now that our rack is flipped over, we'll go ahead and get all of our mounts in place. We're now going to put our middle mounts on. This is going to be for both the premium and economy racks. Just like our rear ones, we have the same C-shape or U-shaped channel. We want to put this towards our side panel. If you notice, your mid mount has a little notch right here. This notch is going to line up with our threaded insert. When this is put in correctly, everything lines right up. You should see your T-slots on one side or the other from flipping it. We're going to go ahead and line them up so we can put our mount on. With our mount in position, we're going to grab a 1/4 inch by 1/2 inch long bolt. We're going to put on our washer. We're going to line up our mount and put our bolts in hand tight. Again, 1/4 inch by 1/2 inch long, washer, line up our T-nut, and put our bolt in. This will all get adjusted when we install the rack onto our 4Runner, so leave it. You want them to be tight, but movable. Now that we've put our middle mounts on, if you have an economy rack with no LED cutout, you can skip these steps and move on to 4Runner prep and getting the rack installed. If you do have a front light, we're going to go ahead and put those mounts into position. A very important note, these tabs need to be pointing towards the outside of the rack. If you put them on this way, your light's going to block these bolts and you're not going to be able to tighten this one. So please make sure that your tabs are pointing towards your side panel. Again, we're going to use a 1/4 inch by 1/2 inch long bolt with a 1/4 inch washer. We've got our mount in on this side. We're going to put our mount in on the other side, and then we're going to install our LED. Now that we have our light mount brackets in, we're going to go ahead and put in our LED. One of the best features about our roof rack is it accepts dual row LEDs. So you're getting twice the light output on the same rack. Today we're putting on one of our 42 inch dual row LEDs. These racks also take the dual function white and amber lights. If you have an economy rack, the mounting brackets install the same, but they are a little bit longer, and those will accept a 42-inch single row LED. We're now going to put our LED on our mounts. This is what we like to call a standard LED hardware kit. Your light's going to come with a bag of hardware in the box. You can dispose of all that hardware that comes with the light. Your light mounts will come with this light bar hardware kit. To get this ready for installation, we're going to take our M6 bolt and we're going to install a split lock washer. Then we're going to install a flat washer. This is going to put our bolt into our LED, and the split lock is going to keep it from coming loose. Again, we take our bolt, install our split lock, and then our flat washer. Now let's get our LED into position. One detail you guys need to pay attention to for your LED installation is what side you want to run your wire on. We prefer running the wire for our LED down the driver's side A-pillar between the window and the rubber trim piece. Remember, our rack is upside down right now, so the right side is our driver's side. Another note is where this wire goes through the mount. A great feature on our mounts is this cutout right here. While it might look cool, it also serves a purpose. Feed your wire through that hole. This allows your wire to be routed out of the way and not bent over once your LED is fully installed. I'm going to go ahead and put my LED into position and put in one of my bolt assemblies. With everything hand tight, we're going to go ahead and grab our Allen wrench and tighten our mounts to our LED. But we are not going to tighten our mounts to our extrusion. You can adjust the aim of your LED later, but right now we need to get our mounting brackets into position. Now I'm going to center our LED. Go ahead and grab a tape measure. Find a common spot that you can measure on both sides. Take your measurement and get your LED centered. Now that our LED is centered on the rack, we're going to start by tightening the bolts on the front and then the bolts on the back. We're now going to install our 360 light pod mounts and our lights. You notice that they have these nice fingers that fit over your light to help hold it into position. We need to make sure these fingers are pointing through the hole. This bracket is incorrect. You can see that the fingers are pointing towards the center of the rack. Instead, we want one where the fingers are pointing towards the light cutout. The next step is we need to go ahead and install a pod onto just one bracket, because what we want to do is we want to set our depth and our adjustment. These bolts are not able to be accessed while the pod is on. So we're going to do one test, figure out our measurement, and then we're going to put all of our brackets on and all of our pods on. Included with your pod is this little hardware kit. There's only two things in here that we're going to need. We're going to need this long bolt and this nut. Go ahead and put your mounting bracket on your pod. It's very important that the wire is down below the bracket, not on top of the bracket like that. We put it like this, put our bolt through, and put on our nut. Using the included Allen wrench and a 10mm, you can go ahead and tighten this down so that it is slightly locked in. For this setup, we are 2 inches from the side of the rack to the side of the mount. I will now go to all 4 positions on my rack, line up my T-slots, and I will put in my 1/4 inch by 1/2 inch long bolt with a washer in both the top and side position. We're gonna go ahead and tighten these things down. This front one can be a little tough. Sometimes a good old-fashioned L wrench with the ball end is a perfect tool to help you reach in there and get your bolt in where you need it to go. After putting all of our pods on, that completes the preparation of our roof rack. It's now time to prepare our 4Runner. The first step is to remove the covers from our factory roof rack. You're gonna need a flathead screwdriver, a piece of foam, cardboard, a rag, anything to protect your paint. There are some tension snaps inside of here. So all you have to do, popping your plastic up until it pops off. From here, go ahead and remove your cover. You're gonna do this for all 4 covers on your roof rack. Next, we're gonna remove these 2 bolts. We have already loosened ours up, but this is a 12mm. Toyota puts Loctite on these bolts, so they are gonna be a little tough. Just go ahead and remove them. There are 2 in each of the 4 positions. Remove your covers, remove your bolts, and have a friend help you lift your factory rack off of your 4Runner. With our factory roof rack off, now would be a great time to grab a rag and clean off some of this dust from where your seal was. After your roof's all clean and ready, you're gonna take these spacers that were involved in your kit. There are some plastic little pieces sticking out of the top of the roof here. The diameter of this is made to set over those and lock them into position. Put them in all 8 locations and then get ready because we're gonna put our rack on. Grab yourself a helper. Also do yourself a favor and push your mirrors in. We're gonna lift this thing up and put it in place. You're gonna set this thing down nice and gentle so you don't damage your paint. If you need to reach over and move them out, go ahead and do it. Now with the rack on top of the 4Runner, we're gonna go ahead and climb up here and get everything centered and get our mounts over our bolt holes. And we're gonna reinstall our factory bolts.
Yes.
Again, with our rack installed, we're taking our factory bolts, we're lining up all of our mounts, putting them through the spacer, and into the threaded inserts in your roof. This rack is adjustable left to right and forward to back, but the first step is to get our bolts all into position, again, hand tight. Now we've got our rack in position. We've went ahead and put our 8 factory bolts back in. A note before you tighten these down, if you would like to, you can put some silicone in the bolt holes for some extra water protection, but Toyota does a great job of putting a nice rubber O-ring on those bolts, and they seal up very nicely. The final steps on this are pretty straightforward, so we're not going to show them to you. First of all, you're going to want to center the front of your rack left to right. This is done very easily by looking at some visual cues on both sides and making sure our rack is centered. On the back of the rack, you're going to have your antenna right in the center. Simply grab your tape measure. You're going to want to be 24 inches from the side panel to the center of the antenna. Now your back is centered. The last adjustment is forward and backward. You want to go ahead and pull this rack backward until you get a nice contact from this seal all the way across the top of your roof. Once you see that you got a nice contact on here, you're centered left to right, everything is in position. You're gonna go ahead and get your 12mm and you're gonna torque down all of your 8 factory roof rack bolts. After those are done, you're gonna grab your Hw4 and you're going to tighten down your bolts that go from your mounts into your extrusion and T-nuts. Remember, there's 2 on the middle mount, 2 on the rear mount, 4 on the passenger side, 4 on the driver's side, however you want to look at it. Once you get all those bolts tightened down, your rack is installed and ready for action. A couple notes. Number 1, you remember how we adjusted our valence. We loosened our knobs, you got to loosen both sides, and then you can push your light cover down. Once it's in position, tighten your knob back up. Next is wiring. As much as we would love to provide you guys with a nice, complete harness, there are quite a few ways that this rack can be configured and wired. Whether it's the dual row light bar that uses one of our provided wiring harnesses, or a dual function light bar, which does require a custom harness in order to get your different amber and white lights working independently. There's also the side lights. Depending on your preference is how you're going to wire them. Some people want all 4 to come on at the same time. Some want the left or the right side to go on independently. The options are limitless for you. We highly recommend, if you are not moderately skilled at 12-volt wiring, to take your rack to a professional installer. The cost of a few $100s to have your rack wired is not worth the risk of a wiring fire that could catch your whole vehicle and burn it down. We're here to have fun. We're not here to burn our vehicles down. So make sure you do a nice quality wiring job with your rack. Thank you very much for tuning in to our installation video today. Please check out CaliRaisedLED.com for all of your off-road and lighting needs. Thank you.